I'm Dr. Rahman, and welcome to Black Women's Health Podcast. My special guest today is Miss Rolanda Wilkins, activist, advocate, entrepreneur, otherwise badass Black woman. This is pretty special because I'm in Philadelphia and you're all the way across the country in California, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What city?
Sacramento.
Sacramento. Okay, so this is truly, we're spanning the country, and hopefully we're gathering all of the Black women between those 2 points.
Yes. Yes.
So let me start by saying I received an email about you. And what I like to do is read just the first part of it.
Okay.
Okay. The email says, I am reaching out to bring your attention to the extraordinary efforts of a remarkable woman who has been profoundly impacting the lives of Black girls and women for the past 3 decades and continues to do so with unwavering dedication. Her name is Rolanda Wilkins, affectionately known as Mama Ro.
Yeah.
That's pretty special. How did this activism begin for you?
Okay. So I want to first start off by saying thank you for having me. This is a pleasure. I am originally from Philadelphia. My family, yeah. My dad is from South Philly. My mom is from
Yes.
North Philly. In
Yes.
1983, my dad had this brilliant idea to move us to California. He was a cross-country truck driver, and he
Okay.
came out to Sacramento and was like, "We getting out of Philly." So because the weather and everything. So we moved out here, but I will tell you, I was born in 1971. The 70s for me were so vivid for me. And I think that's the basis of why I do the work that I do. I remember being in North Philadelphia uh, and seeing Black people love on each other so hard in the 70s. That's like burnt in my brain. I felt like when I was growing up that every Black person knew each other.
Wow.
Because we would see each other say, "Hey, sis, hey, bro, hey, mom, hey, auntie." Like, I remember us talking like that to each other. And then in 83, my dad had this idea to move us to California. So when we came out to California, California is a little different. So you have a lot of Black people from all over the place that moved to California. So those migration patterns, right? You have people from Arkansas and Texas, and you have people came up from, like, my mother's family is from Virginia. My dad's people are from South Carolina, the Sea Islands, and they came up to Philly, but then we all came to California. So it's
Yes.
always looking for something better, if I can
Always.
be honest.
Yes.
So being in Sacramento, sometimes you will see other Black people and they wouldn't necessarily speak to you. And some of them would, because they were the people that were from the South, from the East. But the people who were local, they didn't necessarily greet you or acknowledge your presence, if you will. However, this is when the crack era started rolling in like 83, 84 out here in California. And that's when I also seen the amazing work that Black people, particularly Black women, if I had to be honest, helping to take care of children who mothers and fathers were out there in that. The crack era to me is the most impactful time that I'm still dealing with, even with my the young women that I work with, because I'm constantly explaining what we were like before crack showed up. So I'm always trying to give young people like this ideal of where we were, as opposed to where they see us now.
Okay.
So in that time, I remember just seeing my mother included, blessed memory, and other women jump in and helping people. So, and then that's when the foster care system started to boom, because before then you kind of stayed with the people in your community. We didn't really have a foster care system at that time. So that kind of started booming in that time. But then I had the opportunity when I was graduating from high school. I met a woman named Kathryn Hall at the time. Now she's Kathryn Hall Trujillo. And this woman had the idea of matching up, because the infant mortality rate was very high at that time. And Kathryn worked for the state of California, but she was a fiscal administrator. But she was seeing what was happening in our communities, babies being born with drugs on board. So she had this idea of matching up trained volunteers that they call sister friends with a pregnant teen or woman. Working with her was amazing because I helped her, and I felt really blessed to be assisting her and training all of these community women to be matched up with a pregnant teen or woman to stay with this woman until her baby is born, and then for a year after the baby is born. But once you've been with someone through their pregnancy and helping them navigate the system of healthcare and resources, y'all like bonding for life. Like, so what was amazing about that for me
Yeah.
was here are these Black women. This was not a funded program. This was a woman working this out of her house who was a state worker, and she knew that if we didn't figure out how to reconnect to each other, that we weren't going to make it. So you had women who were judges, who were attorneys, who were housewives, and they stood up and was like, we want to take this training and we want to be matched with this pregnant teen or woman. And that's when we started to see that infant mortality rate go down because they've been up for a couple of years. Then my boss had the wonderful idea, well, why don't we just build a clinic? And I was like, huh? But she was like, we need to build a clinic because we know when a woman goes for healthcare, that's crucial. Our clinic was staffed by midwives. So this woman, Miss Kathryn was so, I love me some Miss Kathryn. She was so like aggressive. See, here's a woman who came out of the 70s. She's from she's originally from Arkansas, ended up in Los Angeles. And so she was in the middle of all of the Panthers and all of that. So what I learned from her, which was reminding me of the 70s, is that you must do something for yourself. It's up
Mm.
to us to go save our babies. We can't
Mm-hmm.
ask nobody else to go save our
Mm-hmm.
babies. That's our job.
Mm-hmm.
So she was like, no, we're going to do this. But when she had the idea of the clinic, I was like, huh? Because sometimes women would go to the doctors, and that's where they needed to have someone help them to advocate because they
Yes.
wouldn't be treated fairly. So she had this whole idea. We got a building, and the first time the construction people hit the wall, it had asbestos. And then we were like, oh no. And then somebody from a Irvine Foundation came by to visit my then boss, Kathryn, and she was in there crying, like, I don't know what we're gonna do. We don't have the money. And he walked in and was like, well, what you need? And she was like, we need like $75,000. He's like, we got it, write it up. We was
Wow.
like, huh? So then we was able to get that clinic open. But what I seen in the clinic was a lot of Black women. We scraped the walls. I mean, we scraped the carpet off the floor. I mean, it was a hands-on effort, before the construction people could really get in there. But I seen Black women in all different kind of backgrounds work.
Volunteering. A lot of them were just
Yes,
volunteering.
yes, because they knew how much we really needed healthcare. And again,
Wow.
I just have to say, I think a lot of that came out of people who were impacted from that time in our history where people were doing things for themselves. And I think sometimes we kind of skip over that sometimes because now we're in the business of we need a grant. Kathryn didn't necessarily wait for the grant.
Mm.
I did all kind of stuff with her that we did not wait for a grant. I was a
Mm.
foster care mom at 19 because at the time, everybody was taking babies home because they were trying to keep our children out the system. Stayed with me for like 6 months, and then we were able to get her placed with a woman who had her older sister.
Oh,
So she
nice.
got placed with the
Nice.
woman who had her,
Nice.
had her sister. So it was like stuff. I mean, I remember us doing stuff like we didn't, and not waiting for somebody to tell you, go save yourself. That was the whole key about the birthing project. Because our infant mortality rate was so high, Kathryn was like, we got to do something. And I'm glad other Black women was like, well, what we doing? I just feel like being in America, sometimes you are taught to feel like you don't have anything, but you really do have a lot.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
You know what I mean? But
Absolutely.
if you're not exposed, then you don't really know what you have.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So what happened to the clinic?
So the clinic stayed open for about 25 years, and
Wow.
then they end up closing um, because they had like a new director, and the director wasn't connected to the people.
All
So
right.
that's really how the clinic worked.
Okay.
So, and sometimes I see that kind of thing happens a lot. Like sometimes we love to empower Black folks, which nothing wrong with that, but sometimes they don't be connected to a base. So sometimes they'll get in the door And then what makes the clinic work is being connected to the grassroots, to the people, because that's who brings in the clients. We also had other programs. This is something I'd even do now in my nonprofit. We had other programs, like we had an Imani program, which was for our women who were dealing with substance abuse issues. We had programs to fund girl empowerment, because
Mhm.
I would do a home visit with a teenager, like to kind of enroll them in
Mhm.
for some social support. Then I would come back like a month later, and then her sister would be pregnant, her little sister. So I was like, we got to do something so that she doesn't become pregnant, because that's not the only way you should be able to get support. We shouldn't have to wait for you to get pregnant
That's
and then
that's
it would come.
interesting.
But we also looked at, when you look at a woman's health care, you have to look at all of the other factors around her. It's not that she just gets to the clinic, but it's like, what is her social support like? Who is there helping her walk her through her life? you know, who was teaching her what it means to be in a relationship? Like how to, if you were raised a certain way and you don't want your kid to kind of experience some of that stuff,
Hmm.
what can you
Hmm.
do differently so you can offer something different to your children? Not swing so much to the other side. Like, how do you maintain balance?
Right.
Um, and so when I worked for the Birthing Project, I always had this thing where I wanted to work with girls, and particularly Black girls, because when Black women would come for their doctor's appointment, they would usually be by themselves or maybe have a girlfriend with them. Now, mind you, we served everybody. So the Latino sister would come in, she would be there with her husband and sometimes her grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
Asian women would come, they would be with their husband. All the other groups would come, but
Hmm.
Black women would kind of be by themselves, or, and we had like some other issues going on. So my job, like I kind of just carved this niche out, is I wanted to empower them and let them know who they really were. And
Okay.
like, I always say, when you're pregnant, you are like co-creating with the universe. So your pregnancy is special. So if you're arguing, your baby feels that. But if you're loving on yourself and reading to your baby and letting them listen to good music, your baby feels all of that in the development. And I felt like all women get that, but Black women especially needed it because they had a lot of stuff they were carrying besides the child. But then what I decided to do is that I really wanted to work with girls before they became pregnant.
Hmm.
At some point, you're like kind of catching people jumping off of a cliff. And then at some point, you have to say, well, where are they? Why are they jumping off the cliff? You have to go up to the cliff and be like, well, what's going
Right.
on here? So
Right.
for me, that's when I started doing, it was called the Dream Academy. And we ended up naming the Judge Alice Lytle Dream Academy because she was another woman who was, like, I think, the youngest of 13, and she was a judge in town. She did Superior Court, Juvenile Court, and she was on our board. So I would always go up and have her sign checks and stuff like that. But watching her on the bench, she did stuff like she helped to come up with a law where there was like a daycare for people's kids to be in while they were in court. Uh,
Hmm.
Shackled to the bed. She was very instrumental. Like, you cannot be shackling women while they're giving birth. Like, she was just really aggressive, but she was originally from New York. So even with her, like, watching how, even in her position, how she would be fighting her little battles to make sure women were treated with dignity and respect.
Hmm.
They can want to do, but really giving them room to dream and to see each other and to
Hmm.
support each other. Now, that's something that I learned straight up out of working with Miss Kathryn, because she was a part of the Black Women's Health Project. She was a part of, there was a group in Los Angeles. I cannot remember the name, The Well. I think it's called The Well, where Black women gathered and worked with each other, like in the 70s and 80s in Los Angeles. So here's a woman, even though I'm not from that area, she brought all of that with her
Hmm.
and exposed me to it all. And here I am, 30-something years later, still doing the work that she was doing. And she's retired, like semi-retired, you know. But I just feel like exposure is everything in
Very
both ways,
so.
positive and negative, whatever you expose your babies to.
Wow. Wow. How refreshing it is to hear a woman praising the works of another woman. During Women's History Month, Rolanda Wilkins, Mama Ro, as she is affectionately called by many, provides us with history. and tells us of the powerful Black women who have helped to shape her mission, her advocacy. Stay tuned for next week as she discusses her organization and her many projects. In the meantime, take care and peace.